Hey, what's going on, guys? So in this video we're going to create a responsive grid CSS website or grid CSS theme, and it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's going to teach you about the fundamentals of the grid in a real project, which seems to be lacking on the web and in tutorials. But one great resource is Wes Bos's new grid CSS course, which is where I got the idea for this project, so I will put a link to that course in the description. Okay, we'll also be looking at and using CSS variables, rem units, things like that. So modern CSS techniques. So basically, just to go through it real quick, we have a simple nav at the top, which uses the grid. We have basically 4 different sections, 4 fractionals. Then this part here is the top container, and we're actually going to be using grid template areas for this part, which I actually left out of my grid CSS crash course because we ran out of time in that video. But we can basically assign named template areas to our grid, which is really cool, and I actually created some images to give you a visual representation of how that works. All right, and then underneath that we just have some simple boxes here using some Font Awesome icons. We'll actually be using Font Awesome 5, which was just released. These are actually SVG icons. And then below that we have the info section, which is basically just 2 fractionals or 2 grid columns. Very simple. And then some images here coming from Unsplash. These are just some gallery images, and then a very simple footer. All right, now we're not going to do the inner pages. If you guys want to take it upon yourself and try to create those pages on your own, that would be a really good learning experience. And just to show you the responsiveness of this website, if we go bigger, you'll see that it still looks good. If we go down until we get about 700 pixels, which is right here, you'll see that everything changes. So basically the menu goes vertical. We have the showcase is now on its own column, on its own line, and then the 2 top boxes are side by side, and then these boxes are all side by side. This area, the info area, is just one big box or one big area, and then we have the gallery images, which are 2 side by side. And then if we go down to 500 pixels, okay, that's 700. Once we hit 500, you'll see that everything is just in a single row. So this would be like on small mobile devices. Okay, and we're going to change the grid template area up in the media queries to make this responsive. So that's what we'll be building, guys. Hopefully you enjoy it. Let's jump into it. Alright, so we're going to get started. Now with most projects, it's a really good idea to follow along and actually open your text editor and code along with me. It gives you a much better learning experience than just watching, but it's up to you how you want to do it. If you do want to code along, then just go ahead and create a folder. I called mine Grid Biz. And inside that folder you want an index.html file and a style.css file, and you can see they're both completely empty. And then I also have an image folder, an img folder, with 2 images. One is showcase JPEG and one is pic1.jpg. And if you want to download these directly, you can go to pexels.com and search for web. And you can see this image right here. I grabbed the medium and I named it showcase.jpg. The other one I searched for business, and it's this one right here, and I downloaded the medium version as well. But if you want, you can also get them from the code pen in the description. And if you noticed, my showcase is a little darker because I faded it out a little so that the text is a little more prominent on top of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now we are going to be using Font Awesome as well, and Font Awesome just upgraded to version 5, which uses SVG icons, so we will be using that. But first let's jump into our HTML file and let's add our HTML head body tags. Now I'm using VS Code, which comes with Emmet, which allows us to do shortcuts for HTML and CSS. So I can just do !tab, and that'll give us our base layout. And I'm just going to close this sidebar up. If you are using a different text editor, I'd highly suggest installing Emmet. It makes things much quicker. So we'll go ahead and change this title up to, let's say, Grid Biz. And then we're going to want to use Font Awesome, so I'm going to go to Get Started. And we're going to use SVG with JavaScript, which is recommended. So we just want to grab this script tag right here, and we want to put this in the head, just like that. And then here I'm just going to link our style sheet. So style.css and save, and we should be all set for our head area. Now if you want, you can open up your index.html file, or if you're using VS Code, you can do what I'm doing and use Live Server, which is an extension. And if you want that, you can click on this icon, search for Live Server, and install it. Once you do that, you'll be able to right click and just say open with Live Server. And this gives you auto reload, so every time I save it'll update. I won't have to keep reloading it. Alright, so let's start in the body now. So everything is going to be wrapped inside of a wrapper. So I'm going to create a div with the class of wrapper. You want to make sure you stay within this. Actually, I'm going to put a comment right here that just says wrapper ends. Okay, so inside the wrapper, let's create our navigation. I'm going to try to keep this commented for you guys. So navigation, we're going to use a nav tag and give it a class of main-nav. And inside here, we're going to have a UL and some LIs. Let's put an A tag in here. These aren't actually going to go anywhere, so I'm just going to put a hash. And then I want a couple more of these, so we're going to have 4 different navigation items. So this one will be about. This one will be services. And this one will be contact. Alright, so that's our navigation. If I save that, that should show up. It's going to look ugly, but it shows up. Now notice how my HTML changed when I saved it. That's because I'm using an extension called Prettier, which formats your whatever HTML, CSS, JavaScript when you save. I don't really like having these on separate lines, but whatever, it's fine. So it does, because it fixes a lot of other stuff as well if you miss, for instance, semicolons in your JavaScript or CSS. So under the nav, we're going to do the top container. Alright, so the top container is this right here. It's the showcase, and this is the top box A and top box B. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do a section here with the class of top container, and inside here we're going to have a header with the class of showcase. Okay, so the showcase is going to have an h1, and it's going to say your web presence. Whoops, your web presence. And underneath that, we're going to have a paragraph. Now with Emmet, you can do lorem and then a number. I'm going to do 15 and then hit tab, and it's going to give me 15 words of dummy text. Okay, under that we want to have an A tag, and I'm going to give this a class of BTN, which is going to be a custom button class that we create so that we can make our links look like buttons. Okay, and we'll just say read more, and then that's it for the showcase. If I save it, it should look like that. Now, still within the top container section, we're going to do the first top box. So it's going to be a class of top box, and then another class of top box A. Okay, and then inside here we're going to have an H4. We'll say membership, and underneath that it's going to have the pricing. That's going to be in a paragraph called price, and this is going to be $1.99 per month. And then underneath that we'll have an A tag, and let's actually give this a class of BTN, and we'll say buy now. Alright, so we're going to have 2 of these, so I'm going to copy this whole top box div and paste one right underneath, and we're going to change this to top box B, and then change this to pro membership, and then this is going to be $2.99 per month. Okay, so we can save that, and that's it for the top container. So next is going to be the boxes section. So I'll just say boxes section, and we're going to use a section tag with the class of boxes, and then each box will have a class of box. Okay, and in each one of these we're going to have an icon. So let's put an I tag with the class. Actually, I'll just show you. Let's go to Font Awesome and go to icons. This first one is going to be a chart icon, so I'm going to search for chart, and I want this one here. And if we go down, it gives us the class of FAS and then FA chart pie. So I can actually just copy that and put that there. All right, now if I save this and we take a look, you'll see that the icons are very, very small by default. So I'm going to add another class in here called FA-4X and save. That'll make it basically 4 times the size. Okay, so that's our icon. Underneath that, we're going to have an H3, and it's going to say Analytics. And then under that, we're going to have a paragraph. I'm going to do lorem 10 tab, which will give us 10 words. And then we'll basically just, let's copy that whole box div and put it in 3 more times. We want 4 of these things. And save. And now we just want to change up the icon. So the second icon is going to be a globe, FA globe. And then the heading here is going to be marketing. Okay, and then this icon here, this is going to be FA-cog. It's going to be a little gear icon. And for the heading, we're going to say development. And then this last icon is going to be FA users, FA-users. And then this heading is going to be support. Okay, we're going to leave the same paragraph text. That doesn't matter. So that's it for the boxes section. Now we're going to move on to the info section. So for this, we're going to do section with the class of info, and inside here we'll put our image. The image is going to be in the IMG folder, and it's going to be called pic1.jpg. Okay, underneath that we're going to have a div, and inside the div we'll have an H2, and we're going to say your business on the web. Underneath that we'll have a 30-word paragraph, so I'm going to do lorem 30 tab, and then under that we're going to have an A tag with the class of BTN, and the text will just say learn more. All right, we'll save that, and that's our info section. Okay, and the image is going to be huge. Don't worry about it. All this stuff is going to look very ugly until we get to our CSS. All right, so next we have the portfolio section. Okay, so in here we're basically going to have 9 images, and the images are going to come from unsplash.com, which just kind of generates random images for us. So it's going to be https source.unsplash.com/random/ and then the size, which is going to be 200 by 200. Okay, 200 x 200. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this and put it in 8 more times. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 altogether, and save. And now you'll notice that all the images are the exact same, and I don't want that. So to change the image, all we have to do is change the size. So the second image, I'm just going to, the first 200, I'm going to make 201 and save. And notice that now that's a different image. So I'm going to go to the next one and do 3, 4, 5. And the size doesn't matter because the images are contained within the container, within their parent. So that really doesn't matter. So 7, wait, 0, 1, oh, I forgot 2. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I like it 1 through 9, or 1 through 8, sorry. All right, so we'll save that. And now if we go down here, we have all different images. Okay, so that's that. Next thing we'll do is the footer. That's the last thing on the page. So we're just going to do a footer tag, very simple. We're just going to put a paragraph, and we'll say, what is this, grid biz. Let's do a copyright symbol, so ampersand copy semicolon 2018. Whoops. Okay, and that's it. That's it for our HTML. So now we're going to go to our CSS, which is the hard part and the long part, and we're going to start off by creating some CSS variables. Why can't I spell variables? Okay, so if you guys have never used CSS variables, don't worry about it. It's not difficult at all. If you want, you can go and check out my video on CSS variables. I did about a month ago or so. But basically what we're going to do is just define a scope of root. So any variables that we create in here, we can use throughout this whole style sheet, throughout anywhere. We're not restricted to certain elements. So we're just going to have 4 variables. One is going to be primary. So each variable is prefixed with a dash dash. Primary color is going to be DDD in hex, which is just a very light gray. We're also going to have one called dark, which will be 333. We'll have a light, which will be white, which is just triple F. And then also for the shadow, if you notice, if we look at the final theme here, all of these boxes, they all have this box shadow. So I want to put that in a variable so that we can easily access it. So it's going to be 0, 1 pixels, 5 pixels, and then RGBA. And the color we want is going to be 104 3 times. And then for the alpha, the opacity is going to be 0.8. All right, so that's it for our variables. So we can use these throughout our CSS now. So let's go and create our HTML CSS. So we're going to say box sizing, and we're going to set that to border box. That'll make it so that if we use any padding or anything, it doesn't affect the width of the element. We're also going to set the font family here to Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif, but of course if you want to use something different, that's fine. And then the base color, I'm going to use a variable, so I need to say var and then pass in the variable I want, which is going to be the dark. Alright, so now I'm going to do the body. So for the body, I'm going to give it a background of CCC, which is a very light gray. I didn't put that in a variable because this is the only time I'm using it, so it'd be kind of redundant. Let's add a margin. Now I'm not using a container. I'm not restricting the wrapper of our website. I want it to be full width, but I do want to have a little margin on the all sides of the website. So we're going to do, let's see, we'll do 30 pixels top and bottom, 50 left and right. Okay, and then we're going to give it a line height of 1.4. All right, there we go. So next thing we're going to work on is the button, the BTN class, because that's kind of a global class. We're using it all throughout the site. So I'm going to give it a background color of our variable, our dark variable. And then the color, which is the text, I'm going to give it the light color. Okay, and then we're going to give it some padding. Now I'm going to try to use rem units rather than pixels just because it's more responsive. So we're going to do 0.6 rem on the top and bottom and 1.3 on the left and right. And 1 rem is just a multiplier for the root HTML font size, which by default is 16 pixels. So 1 rem by default is going to be 16 pixels. Okay, 1.3 is going to be whatever 16 pixels times 1.3 is. And I have a whole video on rem and em units if you want to check that out. All right, so let's see. We also want to remove the underline, so text decoration we're going to set to none. And then also border, we're going to set that to 0. Okay, and there's our buttons. And let's see, we're going to go ahead and say that all the images, we want the width, or we'll set a max width rather, to 100% because we want the images to stay within their containers, within their parents. Okay, and then for the wrapper that goes around everything, we're going to display that as a grid, and we want to give it a grid gap, okay, which is the spacing in between everything. That way we don't have to manually assign all of our margins and stuff. So we'll say 20 pixels for that. Okay, so that's kind of the core styles. Now we're going to work on each section. We're going to start with the navigation up top. So I'll put in a comment here. We'll say navigation, and that has a class of main nav, and we want the UL. Okay, so this is going to be display grid, just like most things. And we're going to say grid gap 20 pixels. And let's set padding to 0, because by default ULs have padding. And then set the list style to none. We don't want any bullets. And then we're going to set the grid template columns. Okay, now for the columns, we have 4 links, right? So we can do one fractional 4 times like this. And save, and it'll do that. It'll spread it apart, basically 4 different sections. A shorter way to write this, though, would be to use repeat and say repeat 4 times one fractional and save, and it gives us the same thing. Okay. Now we want to style each individual link, so we're going to go down here and say main nav A, and we want the background to be the primary color, so we're going to use our variable of primary. Okay, then we're going to set the display to block, and we're going to set the text decoration to none. We don't want any underlines. We're going to set some padding. I'm going to use rem, so we'll say 0.8 rem. And let's make them aligned to the center, so text align center. And for the color of the text, we're going to use the dark color, the variable we have. Okay, and then let's also make them uppercase, so we'll do text transform uppercase. And let's do font size 19 pixels. Actually, let's do we'll do 1.1 rem. See what that looks like. And then box shadow, we're going to use our shadow variable that we created above. Alright, we'll save that, and that looks good. Now I do want a hover state, so what we'll do is we'll say main dash nav a hover, and all we're going to do is reverse this. So I'm just going to copy this background here, and let's see, yeah, so wait a minute, yeah, primary. Alright, so we're just going to make the background dark when we hover, and then the color, we'll grab this. The color we're going to make light. So if we save that, we hover, there we go. So now we get the dark background. So let's move on to the top container. By the way, if you guys don't know, to make a comment like that, I just do Control / in VS Code. I don't know if that's an Emmet thing or what. I don't think so, but that'll make the comment for you before you actually type it. All right, so let's create a class of top container. Not create, but style it, and we're going to display it as a grid, and we're going to do a grid gap of 20 pixels. Alright, so this is where we're going to do our grid template area. So let's type out grid dash template areas. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to go on the next line here, and I'm going to first type this out, and then I'm going to explain it, and I'm going to give you a visual representation of it. So I'm going to say showcase top box A. And then I'm going to go on the next line, put another set of quotes, and say showcase, and then top box B. Okay, and then we just need to end that with a semicolon. Now, if I save that, I mean, you can see it's set as a grid, but it's not really doing anything yet because we just set template areas. We didn't actually assign them. But let me just bring over an image real quick to show you. that if we look at this, I have this yellow overlay over the showcase and over the top boxes, and it's the exact same format as this right here, as this text. We have our showcase top box A, and then our showcase top box B. Okay, so we basically want the showcase to take up 2 columns this way and then have 1 of the top box A. We also want it to take up 2 rows this way. Okay, the grid system is 2-dimensional, unlike Flexbox, which is just 1-dimensional. So we can make this take up, we can make it go this way too, and then we have our top box be over here. So you can use these grid template areas as just that, as templates, and you can kind of see how your content's going to look just within your CSS. All right, and I also have some images for when we change this up for the responsive versions as well. All right, so what we need to do now is we need to assign our grid area. So let's do showcase. So we have our class of showcase, and this is what we're going to assign. We're going to say grid area and assign it to showcase, because if we don't do this, it doesn't know what this means, showcase. So we're assigning it here. All right, and then we're going to go down here and we're going to assign our top box A to grid area top box A. And we want to do the same thing with B. So I'll copy that. We'll change this to B and also change this to B. Okay, let's add our semicolons and save, and there we go. So now we have our showcase going this way all the way over to here, and then our top box A and B. Okay, just like this image. Now we just need to add our separate styling to each thing. So let's go back to our showcase and let's go ahead and add a min height of 400 pixels. Okay, and I could set this to anything. If I set it to 800 pixels and save, you'll see that the top boxes will also extend along with the showcase. Okay, but we're going to put that back to 400, and then we're going to add our background. All right, so this is going to be a URL, and it's going to be in the image folder, and then it's going to be showcase.jpg. All right, now I don't want it just zoomed in on the laptop like that, so I'm going to change the background size to cover, and we're going to set the background position to center and save, and there we go. All right, let's see, let's also add some padding. So we'll say padding 3 rem, so that's 16 times 3, and when you use rems, you can see the pixels if you want. If you go down in your development tools here, whoops, into elements, and let's bring this up, and if we go down here, let's see, where's font size? Wait, I'm not looking for font size, I'm looking for padding, which is right here, 48 pixels. All right, so 3 rems is 48 pixels because 16 times 3 is 48. All right, so next thing we want to do is align this stuff. You can barely see it because we need to change the color, but the heading, the paragraph, and I'm actually going to use Flexbox to do this. Now, one misconception is that if you use grid, you can't use Flexbox at all. Now, what I like to do is use the grid to lay out the site, lay out all the boxes, all the areas of the site or the UI of the application, and then I'll use Flexbox to align things inside of those elements. All right, if that makes sense. So we're going to say display flex. So if I do that, automatically it's going to just make it go, everything go horizontal. So of course I want that as a column. So I'm going to say flex direction. We're going to set that to a column so it goes back down the other way. All right, and then just some alignments. We're going to say align items to the start and let's say justify content to the center, which will move it down. All right, and then I'm also going to add the shadow to the showcase. So we'll say box shadow, and we're going to use our variable that we created of shadow. All right, so now let's do the inner elements, the H1 and the paragraph. So we're going to go down here and say showcase H1, and let's say font size. I'm going to make it bigger, so I'm going to use 4 rem, and let's do margin bottom 0 so that the paragraph and the heading can come closer together. And then let's do the color of light, so var light. Okay, there we go. Now let's do the paragraph. So I'll go right here and say showcase paragraph, and let's do font size, and I'm going to say 1.3 rem. Let's do margin top 0, and let's do color, and we'll use our light variable, and save, and there we go. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to put a comment here for top box. So we already have our styles for top box A and B. Now we want for just top box, because both of them have that class, we want to add a background of primary, which is the color that the navbar items have. So we'll say background is going to be var primary. We'll save that. Good. And then let's also display grid. Okay, so everything in it will be displayed as a grid, and we'll align the items to the center, and let's justify the items to the center. And then I'm also going to give it that shadow, so we'll say box shadow and set it to the variable of shadow. Alright, and then we're going to do padding, which will be 1.5 rem, and save. And there we go. Now the price needs to be much bigger, so we're going to go, let's see, I guess we could do, yeah, right here we'll say top box price, and let's set the font size to 2.5 rems, and there we go. So that's the top container. That's all set. Now we're going to go down to the boxes, and just to show you, if I make this smaller, the responsiveness hasn't kicked in yet. You'll see it's not responsive at all whatsoever. We need to add our media queries, and we're going to do that in a little bit. But let's move on to the boxes. So remember, we have a section with the class of boxes. We're going to display that as a grid, and we're going to give it a grid gap of 20, and then we're going to do our grid template columns. Alright, now you have a few options here. If you know that these are going to be 4 across all the time, you could do what we did with the nav, which is right here, just 4 1FRs. But I want to make it kind of, I guess, more responsive, where you could add more boxes if you want. I also want to make it so that we don't have to keep changing the grid template columns when we get to a certain size, because obviously 4 across is too many when you get down to a small width. So the solution to this is going to be to say repeat, and then we're going to say auto fit, and then we're going to use this min max function that comes with the grid, and inside here we're going to say we want a minimum of 200 pixels and then one fractional, max of one fractional. Okay, so that's gonna put them 4 across, and if I make this smaller, oops, if I make this smaller, you'll see that they'll go on the next line, so we don't have to specify the template columns for each media query for each size. It'll kind of do it itself. All right, so I think that that's a good way to do it. So now what we want to do is style each individual box. We want to give it a background and stuff, so let's say box, and it's going to have background, and we'll use the primary variable. We also want to align everything to the center, and let's add some padding. So I'm going to do 1.5 rem on the top and bottom and 2 on the left and right. And then let's add a box shadow, and we'll use our shadow variable. And save, and there we go. Alright, so let's move on to the info section, which is really easy. So we're going to say .info, and let's add our background. We're going to use the primary. I'm just going to copy this. And we're also going to have the box shadow. Whoops. Copy that, and then we'll do display grid. Let's add a grid gap. I'm going to use 30 here just to push it apart a little more, and then let's do our grid template columns, and this is going to be really simple. I just want to do 2 fractionals, or 1 FR 1 FR, but I'm just going to use repeat. So we'll say repeat twice 1 FR, and that will just split it in half. Okay, and then finally I just want some padding, which will be 3 rem, and save, and there we go. So it's just split into basically 2 columns. So now we need to do the portfolio. So portfolio is going to display as grid, and let's give it a grid gap of 20. And then for the grid template columns, I'm going to do the same thing I did here and auto fit, except actually, is that what I want? Yeah, that should do it. So if we save that, good. And display grid gap. All right, so for the images, I'm going to make sure that the width is 100% of its container, and then we also want the box shadow, which will be our variable, and save, and there we go. Alright, good. So now we just need the footer, which is very simple. We'll just use the footer tag as our selector, and we're going to say margin top 2 rem, background is going to be the dark color, and then the color will be the light color. Okay, let's make sure it's text aligned to the center, and let's add a padding of 1 rem. Okay, and there's our footer. Alright, so that's just the regular website. Now we need to work on the media queries, okay, which isn't too difficult. So let's do that down here. So we're going to do a 700 and a 500 media query. So let's say media. So for the max width of 700 pixels, so anything we put in here will only be in effect if we're 700 pixels or less. So first thing we'll do is the top container. Okay, we want to change up the grid template areas. Alright, why it keeps doing that. So let's take a look at this now. I have another image that we can look at. So this is what I want it to look like. And remember that the format of our text is going to look just like this. So we want showcase, showcase, should take up the whole thing, and then top box A and top box B. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make it so this still shows so we can see this. And let's put in showcase, showcase, go on the next line, and you guys probably know what I'm going to do. Top box A and top box B. Whoops, that should have a dash. Alright, so if I save this and we go down to 700 pixels, right there it changes. Okay, so this grid template areas makes it now change to this style, this format. Alright, now some other things I want to do is I want the H1 to shrink up a little, so we're going to say showcase H1, and we're going to set that font size to 2.5 rem. Alright, let's also do the menu. I mean, I guess it looks okay here, but when it gets smaller, you can see that. And also if we were to add more links, so we're going to actually make this, we're going to change the grid template columns. Right now it's 4 1FRs across. We want to make it just 1 FR for each one, so each one goes all the way across. Alright, so we'll say main nav UL, and we'll say grid template columns and just simply 1 FR, and there we go. Alright, so let's see what else we want to do. This stuff is fine. The info, I want this to be 1 FR as well, so what I'll do is just copy this, and I'm gonna change this to info, so that way info is also 1 FR, and it's just, you know, one big block. Alright, now the button here, I want this to go all the way across and be displayed as a block level element, so I'm going to say info.btn, and we're going to display it as a block, and let's see, let's make it width. Actually, we don't need to do that. We'll just say text align center, and let's do margin auto, and save, and there we go. So that looks a lot better, and that should be it for 700 pixels. That looks good. Now when we go down to 500, so when we go down like this, you can see that it no longer looks good. So we want to again change the grid template areas. So I have one more image to pull over, and this is what we want now. So we want showcase top box A, top box B. So let's create another media query. And this is going to be for max width 500 pixels. And what I'll do is just copy this and paste that in. And then I want to change it to this, showcase top box A, top box B. So on this top one, we just want showcase. The second one, we want just top box A. The last one, we want top box B. Let's save and go back, and there we go. So now everything is in a single line. It's all stacked, and it's completely responsive, even on very small mobile devices. Alright guys, so that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully this taught you a little something about the grid. Even if you already know grid CSS, hopefully you had fun doing it and building it. And please leave it a like if you like this video. If you're not subscribed and you like this type of thing, please consider subscribing. I upload videos every few days, every couple days or so. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Hey guys, if you like my style of teaching, check out my premium Udemy courses listed at traversymedia.com. I have courses in Angular, Node.js, Bootstrap 4, PHP, and my most recent 21-hour modern JavaScript from the beginning course. All links from the website are promotional with up to 90% savings.